Why did you motherfuckers come out tonight? I came out tonight to defend some motherfuckers. I don't know how long I'll get to, but let's find the fuck out. How many of you came out tonight to have a good time? I know I did, and I'm going to. I don't know about you though. I think you done fucked up. I think we're all going on a little trip tonight down Storytime Lane. I'll tell you stories, you can call them jokes. I'll make up some shit, promise you that it's just a story, and you can go home tonight and sleep. I know I'll sleep like a baby. So let's think of a first joke to put onto YouTube. I'm thinking of the time I learned to understand my worth and stand up for myself. I'm thinking of the first time I had a gay experience. I was around 13 years old when it happened. I was friends with a guy named Scotty Hankins. His nickname was Scotty Skankins because his house was absolutely filthy. He had a trailer in the local trailer park, and he fit the usual description of white trash. He was definitely poor, full-fledged ginger to boot. He was friendly towards me though, and I met him originally through my brother, who was 3 years older than me. Scotty, I think, was around 16 or 17 at the time of this happening. We'd known each other for at least a year or two at this point. I had started to visit his trailer sometimes to play video games. His trailer was home to a few cats and maybe a dog. He lived with his mother, I think, but no father. As I said, his place was absolutely filthy. Cat shit was everywhere. It was impossible to walk through his house and avoid hitting a pile. But you kind of get used to the smell after an hour or two. Scotty always smelled like cat piss though from living there. When I'd see him at school, it was impossible to not smell the rancid odor on him. I was friends with another guy though who lived in a house infested with probably millions of roaches, and I stayed over his house regularly. So Scotty's conditions just didn't faze me that much. Anyways, one day while I'm visiting his house, he brings up the topic of hotel parties and how cool they are. We talk a bit, and he decides that since he has some birthday money, we should get a hotel room and throw a party. This sounds cool as hell to me. Sounds fun. A genuine hotel party? What could be cooler to a 13-year-old? We'd get some beer, since the local convenience store would sell him 40s despite not having an ID. My hometown was a bit lax on underage sales. Let's just leave it at that. So we got the hotel first, which took a bit of work convincing the hotel manager to rent us a room as we were two teenagers. Scotty kinda looked over 18 though. He had a fairly large amount of facial hair for his age. We ended up paying in cash, which I think made the motel guy a bit nervous. I say motel because that's what we ended up actually settling on. We next went to the convenience store where I stayed outside so Scotty could go in and get the beer alone. Surprisingly, it worked, and we headed back to the motel. Nothing too special yet. Scotty mentioned he knew some people, and he'd use the motel phone to call them and invite people over. That never happened though, but we headed back to the motel anyways and started doing a bit of drinking. At some point, Scotty mentions that he's kinda horny, and if I'd want to rent a porno. I'm thinking this is one of the coolest things I've done, so sure, why not get a porno? He says we can jerk off, that it's normal and okay for guys to do that around each other. I'm thinking that sounds a bit off, but okay, whatever. I trust him and know he's more experienced than I am. So anyways, we head back to the hotel office to see about renting a movie. This is back when they didn't have direct rental in most motel rooms. This is back in the age of VHS tapes still. DVDs I think were just only starting to take over. So we get to the office and start looking at the movies. We realize there's a small section with a curtain that you have to walk past to view the adult movies. We head behind the curtain while the motel guy watches us. I'm sure he's getting creeped out by now. Here's someone who looks like they are over 18 with a clearly underage minor. They're looking at adult movies to go watch in the motel room that the older one just rented out. Sounds like the setup to some struggle snuggle type situation. Can't violate the willing though, as they say. So I head back to the motel room and start watching the video. It's a bit tame, so I'm having a hard time getting aroused, especially trying to do it in front of another dude. By this age, I'd seen some of the better stuff the internet had to offer, so it took a bit of hardcore action to really get me going. I was pretty much a porn addict by this point, self-pleasuring a good 3 or 4 times a day on a slow day. I don't think I'm especially abnormal for that, but I'm guessing I was probably vigorating myself on the upper limits of what is considered normal. So back to the movie. Scotty is able to get himself going, but wants me to get into it as well. He suggests maybe we can go try to find a different movie. So we try again, and this time the motel guy's definitely creeped out and looking at us like we've grown a third eye when we tell him that why we want to exchange the movie for a different one. I mean, we didn't tell him it's because I couldn't get hard off of it. We just said it's not what we're looking for. So we go back behind the curtain and try again. Same problem though. Can't get myself hard to the movie. I'm pretty sure it was a social situation that was making it so hard for me to get going and not the movie in question. But the third try was the charm. It had an especially attractive female lead and showed a fair bit more than the other two videos. I don't remember if there was any mutual jerking off or any other stuff like that. I think it was just self-pleasuring and a finish for us both. It's a bit fuzzy on the details this many years later, and it's probably for the better it stays that way. But thinking about this experience led me to remember the first actual gay experience I've ever had. This is my first time putting it down in writing, or video, depending on your point of view. So I was around 10 years old, and I was visiting the parents of my dad's newest wife. I phrase it that way because I never really accepted her as a stepmom, and it showed in our relationship. Long story short, it was the second time my dad would marry, and I think the last time he needed to do it to learn his lesson and just stop. The parents allowed me to leave the house and roam around freely. I frequently roamed around the neighborhood. It was a habit I'd picked up since I was very little and had a lack of parental supervision to keep me at or around the house. It wasn't unheard of for me to wander miles away. I sometimes get picked up by my parents when they got word and started looking for me. I usually visited creeks, ponds, and other waterways. I enjoyed tossing over rocks and hunting crawfish and salamanders, and I was always especially excited when I encountered a turtle or a snake. My father was fond of reptiles in general, and had allowed me to keep turtles and snakes previously as pets. Unfortunately, the only snakes I ever saw around where I lived were water moccasins. Those are fairly poisonous and not a suitable option as a pet. But I did manage to catch a couple turtles in my hunts and got to keep them in a large aquarium in our living room. I didn't like my stepmom, but I liked where I lived and what I could get into. It was a fun place and I got to go fishing anytime I wanted in the various streams around my house. There was even a decently sized river not far away that I could go and visit when wanting to fish in deeper waters. For 10-year-old me, it was the closest I can remember to the ideal environment to grow up in. Oh, and I had a convenience store less than 100 feet from my house that sold the best cherry Slurpees I can remember. Life was good. So anyways, I wandered away from my stepmom's parents' house. I'm just a couple of houses down the road playing in a random stranger's yard with some Tonka trucks, playing in a dirt patch pretending to do heavy dirt moving. I see the neighbor across the street messing around in his yard. I don't know him, but I've seen him around a few times. He seems nice and usually smiles and waves at me when he sees me. He's an older looking guy, balding, and wears large square glasses. He looks his look kind of feels a little bit lower class, but he seems otherwise quite normal to me. I don't remember why, but at some point I ended up moving my toy trucks to a dirt patch in his yard and playing there. It was in the front of the yard on a front street. It was fairly out in the open place, his house being on the corner of another bend and another road. Despite this, there wasn't usually much traffic around this part of the road. I knew that well, as I traveled up and down the roads frequently as I visited different creeks and streams, including a park around a mile down the road. I sometimes rode a bike or just walked the roads, depending on how adventurous I was feeling that day. Today I was on foot, of course, as I had my toys with me. It was a dump truck and one of those Mad Max style looking road graders that you might see if you live in a cold climate with plenty of snow and ice. I don't remember the neighbor's name, but he came over and we got to talking for a while. I played with the toys in the dirt patch in the yard he had, and he talked to me about where I was from, who I was visiting, did my parents know where I was. It seemed relatively normal and polite. It was neat to be making a friend though, especially with an older guy. I guess at the time I figured he was maybe in his early 20s. He looked a bit worn from life, I guess, and had a fair bit of acne if I remember correctly. I don't know if it was the first time I met the guy that things got out of hand or if I visited multiple times before something happened. My mind tells me that it likely happened that day, and there's a good chance the guy had seen me multiple times, as I played in this area a lot. As I said, I remember him smiling and waving at me previously. Hard to say, details like that are just fleeting and hard to pin down for me. He ends up going back inside for a while, and I start to get a bit cold. The weather turned a bit cloudy. It's looking like it might end up raining. I think I was preparing to leave and had gathered up my toys when he reappeared from the basement door of his house. He walked up the incline leading to the front yard and approached me. He asked if I wanted to play a game. I was feeling kind of tired and wanted to head home before the rain started, so I said sure if it's quick. He said he wanted to play kidnappers and cops. He asked if that would be okay with me. I thought to myself, that sounds like a weird game. I've never heard of that one. I nodded to him, and then he grabbed me and slung me underneath his arm as if I weighed nothing. I was a small child back then. I didn't hit puberty until I was almost 13 years old. I was pretty skinny from my constant exploring and lack of proper eating. I remember his embrace felt unsettling as he carried me down towards the basement door, but I initially felt oddly secure. It seems like the start to a weird game is all. He took me into the basement where it was dark and grimy. There were a lot of old stuff everywhere. It's obvious the place hadn't been cleaned out in years. I was surrounded by old magazines, shelves, and I remember there being a mattress that was crudely placed on a pile of other stuff in the main room of the basement. It was a dingy and dirty single bed mattress. The mattress was probably about 3 feet in the air, piled on top of the pile of debris. My kidnapper decided to put me on the mattress and told me he was going to do some things to me and I was to keep absolutely quiet. He wasn't going to hurt me, that he just wanted to play a game. He took off my shirt. He then used a dirty rag to tie around my head, covering my eyes, nose, and my mouth. I couldn't see much of what was happening, but I could make out some details at the bottom of my vision as the rag still allowed me to see a bit. He climbed onto the mattress after that and used his body to pin me down in place. He'd taken his dick out of his pants and was rubbing it against my stomach. He did this for a while, and I kept thinking to myself, this isn't happening. I should run. He'll kill me if I do. I should fight back. He'll kill me if I do. I should say stop. He'll kill me if I do. I don't know why that thought kept pounding through my head, but I think it helped me cope with what was happening and not totally freak out. After a while, he climbed off me. I don't think he finished. He walked around to the side of the mattress and pulled me to the edge. He turned my head towards him and pushed a part of the rag into my mouth. He was making a hole large enough to put his dick into my mouth without actually touching my lips. I think I began to cry at that point. I don't know for sure. I remember him saying to himself, "No, I can't do this to him." He took me off the mattress and dressed me again. He let me cry for a while, I think, before telling me I couldn't tell anyone what had happened. He told me how he didn't mean me any harm, and it was just a game. That if I told anyone else about it, that the person wouldn't understand would come hurt him. That he was 18 years old, and that he'd be put into jail for a game. He asked me if I wanted him to go to jail for playing a game with me. I told him no. I didn't want him to go to jail. He asked me if I liked chocolate, and I nodded to him that I did. He went upstairs and left me alone for a few minutes. I stayed put, afraid to move. I thought about escaping out the basement door, but I knew he'd locked it. I didn't know if I could unlock it and get out. He returned a few minutes later. While he was gone, he left the door open leading to the rest of the house. I could hear him talking to who I think was his mother for a minute. I don't know what they talked about. He returned soon afterwards, closing the door behind him. He handed me a Snickers bar, my favorite candy bar. I sometimes wondered to myself, was it my favorite? Or did I just tell it to myself it was my favorite to make myself somehow feel better about the story? Memory is a fickle thing. Sometimes part of our past sticks with us. The man let me go soon after, dumping me out the basement door to wander back home. I went home confused at what had happened. I didn't understand that the man had violated me. I just knew it couldn't have been happening. It wasn't right. He'd go to jail if I told anyone. I couldn't let a kind guy go to jail for playing a game with me. I was hurt, but I didn't understand how at the time. A week or two had passed, and I found myself at the same guy's house again. I don't remember how I ended up there. I think there was a group of kittens that I encountered from the road on his property, and I went onto the property to play with the kittens. I had a strong love of cats at this point in my life. Somehow the guy got me back into the basement again. I don't know what happened. It's a black hole in my memory of what he did to me the second time. Try as I might, the memory's gone to me. I think sometimes about what he could have done to make me so afraid of the memory that I block it out so vigorously these many years later. I don't want to know what he did to me, and I hope I never will. I know he left me on the mattress again when it was over, though. He went upstairs and returned with the Snickers bar. He told me if I kept quiet about what he had done, he would make sure to, and he made sure to emphasize that I'd helped whatever had happened. That he'd give me the Snickers bar if I wanted it. I defiantly told him no. I didn't want the Snickers bar. I wanted to be let out of the house. I almost told him I was going to tell someone about what he had done. Almost if he knew what I wanted to say. He told me no one would believe me if I tell. He'll say nothing happened. That I made it all up. That who are people going to believe? Him, an adult, or a little kid? I started to cry then. I think he knew he'd won the battle of wills that happened that day. But he knew that he had to seal the deal. He had to find something to offer to keep me quiet and want to stay quiet. He went back upstairs and came down with the kitten. He approached me and put the kitten into my hands. I hugged the kitten closely and listened to its soft purring in my hands. I cried harder, and the kitten snuggled into my hands in response. I was instantly attached to the kitten and wanted it. I wanted it, and I away from this man. He asked me if I was going to tell anyone. I sat in silence for a minute. He then told me if I told anyone, he would kill the kitten. It'd be my fault the kitten died. Did I want the poor innocent kitten to die? I hugged the kitten close to my chest and shook my head no. He told me I could have the kitten if I kept quiet about what had happened. It'd be our little secret. I left that day with the Snickers bar and a kitten, and had to explain to my dad that the neighbor had given me the gifts. He asked me why, and I just told him it was because he was my friend. I'd keep this secret for years. I ended up moving back to my mother's house when school started back up, having to leave the kitten behind because my mom wouldn't let me have it. I don't know what ended up happening to that kitten, but I hope my dad took good care of it until finding it a new home. I just don't know. I'm too afraid to ask my dad about the kitten, for fear of potentially bringing up what that guy did to me. I spent a long time thinking about what happened those 2 days, or nights, whatever they were. I felt a great deal of shame for a long time from the experience. The longer time went on without telling anyone, the harder it became to want to speak about it. The shame just grew more and more, eating me from the inside. As a grown adult, I've come to terms with what happened to me, and I know that in the end, it wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault that a grown man violated my trust and bribed me with a Snickers bar. It's not my fault. All it took the second time to gain my silence was a Snickers bar and a kitten. I was still discovering myself, and this guy took advantage of my tender age. It's okay, though. I'm doing better now. I'm no longer ashamed of what happened. I can finally think back to what happened and understand it wasn't my fault. I want everyone to know I learned an important lesson from the experience, though. One that I'll carry with me for the rest of my days, and it helps guide me true to this day. My silence and loyalty is worth more than a Snickers bar and a kitten. I'm at least deserving a guy who will treat me to dinner and a movie before he tries to drag me down to his mom's basement. Know your worth. It might just save your life one day. So I thought of a short version of this story, and here it goes. So there I was sitting with a guy in a motel room jerking off to some softcore porn. Just as he finishes his load, I start thinking back to the first time I had a gay experience. I guess I was feeling a bit robbed in the experience, as I couldn't get off to the movie. I thought back to the time my neighbor taught me about the worth of a Snickers bar. I was playing in his yard when he approached me and asked me to play a game with him. He grabbed me and whisked me down to his basement dungeon. Once he's done playing his game with me, he offered me a Snickers bar for having played along. Yum! My favorite. Here I was making new friends, playing new games, and I get chocolate for it. What more could a 10-year-old ask for? I guess more, because I ended up in that basement again soon after. This time he played his games more aggressive with me and left me in tears. Sensing my disappointment in the game, he went upstairs and brought back down another Snickers bar. I wasn't having any of that shit though. I knew I was worth more than a chocolate bar. He sensed I was questioning the reason for the game, so he went back upstairs and came back with a cute cuddly kitten. I'm a sucker for a cuddly kitten, so I latched on that thing like it was the most important living being in my life. He then shipped me off on my way with the kitten and chocolate bars. Years have passed, and I look back on that experience and wonder to myself how I got into that situation. I thought long and hard about it, and realized the reason was simple. The man had bribed me with chocolate and kittens, an irresistible combination for a child. I'm no longer a child, though. I've come to terms with what happened on those 2 days. I finally understood the lesson I was meant to learn that day. It's important to know your self-worth. It just might keep you out of the creepy guy's basement. These days, a guy has to at least take me out for dinner or movie before I let him eat my ass. Thanks for listening.